Welcome to After Hours, OAN's long-form interview show where Washington newsmakers take off their ties, go beyond the sound bites, relax, and tell you their stories. I'm John Hines, OAN's D.C. bureau chief, congressional correspondent, and for better or worse, your Sherpa on this journey. Well, if you're tired of politicians backed by party machines and corporate PAC money, or if you're interested in a candidate who bet on his own run to spotlight and push reform for platforms like Kalshi, and if you want someone who's been vocal about his frustration with Virginia's redistricting, or if you want to hear from someone who left the Democratic Party and is running as an independent, then we have the guy for you. Mark Moran is an independent candidate for the United States Senate in Virginia. Before he ran for Senate, Moran spent a decade on Wall Street advising multi-billion-dollar deals. Now he is running for office without corporate PAC money or party backing on a platform he calls the Commonwealth Plan, built around one idea: Virginia first, Virginia forever. Mark, let's start at the beginning. Why did you decide to run for office as an independent in Virginia?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, John.
Yes, and you get pluses for no tie, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, this is where DC's makers don't wear ties.
Yes,
so
that's the idea.
No tie today.
Yes.
I initially started running as a Democrat, and I spoke out against gerrymandering, and I also was very vocal about my support for the Second Amendment. And that rubbed people the wrong way, to the point that Luis Lucas, the head of the Virginia Senate, who has been very polarizing with gerrymandering, came out against me and said, maybe this isn't the party for you.
Ooh.
Now, I knew that this most likely would happen when I initially filed, but I looked at it as an opportunity to, one, be able to go talk to rooms full of Democrats. And I drove all across the Commonwealth, 15,000 miles, speaking to these local Dem committees. I would go into a room, people would be skeptical, but I would get 95 to 99% of everyone thereafter. Then I started getting... Yeah.
90 to 95% of Democrats were supporting an alternative to their current senator.
People want change.
And we're talking about Mark Warner here, by the way.
Correct.
Who is the senior U.S. senator.
Wealthiest U.S. senator there is. Promised 2 terms in '96. He's now running for his 4th term unopposed. And I looked around and I thought, why does no one challenge him? So I decided to challenge him. Then I started getting shut out from college campuses, that even at places like William & Mary, my alma mater, where I saved 7 of the athletic teams, that they have a scheduling conflict the day before. Same as ODU, same as Virginia Tech. And I start to see that this machine is working against me. And then...
So they don't say no, they just say, well, we can't find any time for you. We have too many conflicts. We're too busy.
We have conflicts, but what I hear is that then Warner would know that I would have a meeting schedule, well, rather his staff would. They would then hire someone from the college Dems as an intern, and then we would have this change in agenda, right, the day before. 3 times in a row. And then I was told from a Dem insider who was on my staff at the time for Virginia Democratic Party, someone who ran Obama's 2nd campaign in Virginia, in charge of the whole thing, to hire certain petition gatherers, right? Because you need 10,000 signatures to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
So I do that. I'm looking through the signatures a few weeks ago, right before the deadline. I see my own name on one of these signature forms without my address, right? And then I start looking through them all. I see the petition gatherers signing, and I start to look at the handwriting and see it's very similar, and it turns out a majority of these are fraudulent. And so if I had turned these signatures in to get on the ballot as a Democrat, they either could have ruined me then immediately, or they could have held power over me and gotten me to do whatever they want me to do.
Is this a kind of a typical tactic?
From what I hear, it is. I mean, the machine will work against you in ways that you have no idea how it can. Because when you run for office, and this is my first time running for office, John, that, you know, you get overwhelmed by these consultants who are like, we know how the process works, right? We'll tell you what to do, which all they tell you to do is get on the phone and call up the richest people you know to get money, because the only value of a candidate is the amount of money that they bring in. And so it doesn't give you any time to think. It doesn't give you any time to question what's going on. And so they kind of just put a candidate through this. I mean, even someone like my next door neighbor in Falls Church, Alex Bastani, who ran for lieutenant governor last year, he used the same petition gatherers. And so I wasn't going to be someone who fell for that, and here I am now.
So the process, I gather, with the Democratic Party kind of turned you off then?
Correct. It was all purity test after purity test.
Are the Democrats too liberal these days, do you suppose? Or maybe not liberal enough?
I view the Democratic Party as a failed marketing exercise of the uniparty. That it's an entire joke. When you look at the DNC that has a significant amount of debt, right, that will throw money at paying Beyonce to perform for Kamala, that will throw money behind these horrible ideas, that it's a betrayal of what American principles are. And so I've always looked at the Democratic Party as the party that stood up for the little guy, right? Which is why I ran as one. And within a week or so, it was clear I made an awful decision. And it was clear that the Democratic Party that I idealized, or that I thought was even close to being real, was not at all apparent, especially in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
So they told you that you needed to raise a lot of money. You were, what was it, investment banking you were in?
I was an investment banker, did about $75 billion of M&A.
Where'd you work?
I worked at Lazard under Peter Orszag, who implemented Obamacare. And then
did you actually work in Wall Street or in New York or Manhattan?
On Wall Street, on the 64th floor of 30 Rock.
So you must know people have got some money, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So it's not. So maybe that isn't a big problem for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the asking for it is such a devaluement to a person to run for office with ideas and then have to spend all your time not talking about the ideas, but calling up rich people for money. It's like prostituting yourself out there. And then I realized this is what leads us to have the worst people possible representing us rather than people who actually should, because it's entirely focused on how can you sell your moral values for money.
Well, sell your moral values or align, or I guess market yourself as someone who has common interests with the person who you're soliciting for money. And the fundamental, I mean, you're right, it takes money. And so the fundamental thing is it's easier for wealthy people to give money, and it's easier to ask wealthy people for money because you know they have money.
Correct.
It's hard to ask people who aren't quite as well off for money because they don't have as much, so it's not as easy for them to give. So sometimes it helps if you know wealthier people, I guess.
Exactly, because the system is designed to either be wealthy and run for office or to be someone like me who knows a bunch of wealthy people. However, a lot of my policies are contradictory to the financial interests of very wealthy people. I look at America as that ever since Jefferson and Hamilton had this debate over a central bank, that I believe we went the wrong way going down Hamilton's.
The Bank of the United States, which he was opposed to, I think, right?
He was. That decentralization is a key theme of this message, right, that I'm here to offer. And that when you look
That's kind of a Republican message, though, isn't it?
Well, I am an independent now, John.
All right, okay. All right.
And I look at it as ever since World War II, the financialization of our society has become something that now affects us all, right? That even within corporate tax code, you're incentivized to have debt as a company, which beholdens you then to banks. You look at the weighted average cost of capital, essentially how you value a company. As a former investment banker, you're incentivized to have at least 20% of your balance sheet as debt. And then you look at this from the 30-year mortgage on to the 401k, that we are beholden to financial institutions in this country, which is why we have 39 trillion debt, 30 trillion GDP. We're paying $1 trillion a year in interest. And this doesn't work. If I'm an investment banker looking at America as a publicly traded company, I'm going to say our capital structure is out of whack, that we are being managed on purpose into bankruptcy. And the only hope for us is to take a massive step and to cut a significant amount of that debt, to restructure. It's going to devalue the dollar significantly. But what that does is creates an artificial tariff, one that means it's going to become so much more expensive to get things from outside this country, so we should create things in this country.
When we come back, Virginia Senate candidate Mark Moran on his unique approach to dealing with the United States national debt. Don't go anywhere. So we are speaking with Mark Moran. He's a former investment banker. Is that
Correct?
And he is running for the U.S. Senate in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. And so you're just talking about something. You're talking about if I got you right, you're talking about, you didn't say refinancing our national debt, but you said renegotiating our national debt. That sounds to me, though, like usually when that happens, somebody's going into bankruptcy. So how is that different from, renegotiating your debt terms? How is that different from like being in a bankruptcy type situation?
Sure. So if we were a publicly traded corporation looking at the balance sheet of America, we're going into bankruptcy, whether anyone wants to admit that or not. And it's almost as if we focus on these kind of day in, day out issues of America, and we know the debt's bad, but we don't know how bad it is. And when we're paying $1 trillion a year on interest, something needs to change. And I look at it as 71% of our debt is held domestically. Now, a renegotiation of that debt, a haircut for the bondholders is something that is feasible. And what that will do is make it so that the dollar gets smacked. It gets devalued, right? But what that's going to do is create an artificial tariff. That will make it so it's more expensive to get things from outside of this country, which means that we're going to have to start making things. And when I look at the decline of America, it's because we stopped making things. Because let's look at Thomasville Furniture, right, in Southern Virginia. They're making cabinets, they're making bookshelves, ottomans. Those people, those Virginians making that, they had meaning in the jobs that they were doing, right? They're making solid oak desks. But then they say, okay, we're going to cut costs, so we're going to outsource this. Well, the desks go from solid wood to just being covered slightly with a thin layer of oak. And we still call them oak, right? But that's a representation of just the devaluement of American society, that we have gone down, we have lost our sense of purpose, our core self, and now we have this lost generation of young men who have no purpose, who look at the world where AI is going to take any job that they could get. But what are they going to do? People, especially young men, need meaning, need purpose, and we don't provide that in America anymore.
So one of the quotes, I think this is from your campaign press kit, is the United States is not functioning as a republic. It is functioning as a publicly traded corporation being systematically asset stripped by the people elected to protect it.
Correct.
Does that include the current senior senator from Virginia, Mark Warner?
That absolutely does. Someone like Mark Warner, who publicly says we need to be cautious of the security state, of the surveillance state. We need to be careful. We need to push back. Yet accepts $37,000 from Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir. Same guy who says, okay, we need to regulate these banks, right? Because he's a Democrat. He's kind of middle of the road, bipartisan type guy, statesman, if you will, and he has been. I don't have too much negative comments to say about Warner, except for who his donors are, which leads you to wonder who controls him. When I look at his list of donors and I see Silicon Valley Bank CEO donates to him, held a backyard event for him, a fundraiser, that then right after Warner rolls back a few regulations in Dodd-Frank that then ultimately lead to the collapse of SVB, I wonder what we're doing here, right? And when I scroll through and I see David Solomon, CEO of Goldman Sachs, I see my former boss, Blair Efron, founder of Centerview Partners, the most prolific investment bank in the world. When I was there, it was 213 people, 2020, $1.7 billion in revenue, right, on advising on deals. But all of these deals that create markets that contract. Bayer Monsanto, a deal I worked on, now 90% of the seed market is entirely owned by one company. CVS Aetna. When we look at why all these rural hospitals are closing, it's the consolidation. It's the natural progression of the capital cycle in America that leads us here. When our vet bills go up, when even youth sports go up, it is all because of the involvement of private equity that then leads to the ultimate sale and consolidation of all these companies.
So running for Senate in Virginia, with your experience, how do you... is there a strategy? It seems like Obviously, Fairfax County is way in Northern Virginia. I think 66% of Fairfax County voters voted for Kamala Harris in the last election, as I recall. Then you've got Loudoun County and Prince William, which are always kind of swing counties, which are also kind of in Northern Virginia. Then you've got kind of the rest of that Golden Triangle, Richmond, and then out to Virginia Beach and Williamsburg and Norfolk and Newport News. I mean, and then you've got, Southwest Virginia, which is culturally much more conservative and probably a little more like the state of West Virginia than it is like the rest of the state.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the strategy for getting the votes? Where do you, what's your plan? I guess. What is it? I mean, where do you get the votes in Virginia if you're running as an independent?
Well, thank you for mentioning Southwest Virginia, because it is an oftentimes forgotten portion of Virginia. There is a law school called Appalachian School of Law in Grundy, Virginia, that is in a legal desert, that in most of these 12 counties of Southwest Virginia, there are fewer than 5 attorneys. Now, I look at a campaign as one that it's...
Is Grundy the town that's halfway in Tennessee and halfway in Virginia?
Bristol is that
Bristol,
town.
Is that,
Yeah. Grundy's right on the border with McDowell County, West Virginia, where there was a 60 Minutes documentary the other week. But I hear from one of the guys in my campaign that they're going to close this law school, and they're going to merge it with Roanoke College, which would move it to Roanoke and then just further exacerbate these legal deserts. So I said a campaign is something that it should create community, which we don't have these days, but it should also work towards the common good. Saving aspects of schools is something that I have experience with. I was able to save my college track team at William & Mary and 6 other teams by going in, discovering federal fraud, manipulation of restricted endowments. I got the athletic director fired, ruined her career, saved all those teams, and it led to 11 teams at Stanford being reinstated too. So 33% of all Olympic gold medalists, teams that were the pipeline for them, being saved. So this school is important to me because as someone who went to law school, I went to UVA Law, and I took out $300,000 of student loans to get my JD MBA at UVA because I was told, go to the best schools possible, right? Do that. You're going to take on some loans. You'll go work as a big law attorney or a banker or whatever. But I look at this school, the Appalachian School of Law, where kids go there. Sometimes they walk in with holes in their shoes, and they stay in the community afterwards. That it's not a UVA law. They're producing real lawyers to stay in the community. So once I heard that they were going to move that school, they were going to merge it, I said, my campaign's about saving this school too. So that's one of the things that I aim to do with this. And so I spent a lot of time in Southwest Virginia. I'm very quick to admit that I am not someone from Southwest Virginia, right? I'm someone from Northern Virginia. Look at me. But the mission that they're doing, those are real people. I believe that America can be saved through Appalachia, and specifically Grundy, that the lifestyles that they have of strong families, of going to church on Sundays, of communities that invest in the individuals, that is what we've lost in the rest of coastal America.
Coming up, Virginia Senate candidate Mark Moran explains his plan to fund free community college classes with money that comes from data centers. Find out more when we return. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody, to After Hours. We're here with Mark Moran. He is an independent candidate. He's running for Senate in Virginia, the great Commonwealth of Virginia. We were just talking about a college in Southwest Virginia that you were using as sort of an example of something that you wanted to do was to save this a law school, thinking that lawyers, from Southwest Virginia, people who go there tend to stay in that community.
Correct.
Just thinking that it's an important asset for that community in terms of building up a base, an educational base. You also, I think, have proposed a broader idea for a similar idea, I guess. It's for community college education. You want to fund community colleges by imposing a tax on data centers in Virginia. And I gather that there are a lot of data centers in Virginia, and I gather this has become something of a cause of concern for Virginia voters. What are you trying to do?
Correct. So in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have the highest number of data centers. We have 665 currently, 514 planned. Now, that's because the internet, DARPANET, the precursor to it, was invented in Arlington across the river in 1969. It expands to Tyson's Corner, where MAE East is, the first large-scale hookup of the internet is. AOL comes 86. When they expand to Ashburn in 1996, that creates Data Center Alley, the highest concentration of data centers throughout the entire world. Now 70% of the entire world's daily internet traffic travels through the tubes in Northern Virginia. And so we have all these data centers, but at the state level, we give away about $1.8 billion a year in tax breaks. These data centers right now in the Commonwealth are 30% of the electrical grid. They're going to be 60% in the next 5 years. So when our Dominion bills go up and up, because the data centers...
Dominion is the power company, right?
Dominion is the power company, correct. And the data centers are feeding into that grid, right? That's not fair, because we, the people, pay in and do the capital improvements to the grid, right? Now, we live in this world where this is going on because we have such a fear of nuclear power that Virginia is the perfect opportunity, especially in the more rural areas, to be able to say, hey, we should have small modular reactors to power these data centers, right? You look at the cost per acre, $6 million in Loudoun County that people are selling to the data centers. It's incredible. So I see this as we are in a war with China on AI, right? A battle that we have to win, really, because when I look at the future of the world, it's the country that controls the internet that wins. We all know that America should control the internet, that principles of fairness, free speech should be allowed. So it's going to be China and their closed ecosystem versus the rest of the internet and its open ecosystem. And if 70% of that open ecosystem travels through the tubes in the Commonwealth of Virginia, then we should have a say. So when you say I propose a tax, I prefer the term a tithe, a compute tithe. Well, rebranding, right? But one based off of the amount of kilowatt hours they're using in terms of energy, right? So it's a principle of fairness. And a very small tax on that, a tithe on that will get passed up to big tech. Well, that would be enough to provide for the environmental liabilities that we know will happen with these data centers, but also subsidize the grid and then make it so that we can have universal community college. Because I look at our educational system as one, it funnels people into four-year colleges. It saddles them with student loans, and it really doesn't prepare them for the future. But the community college system is one that if we were to own that and were to restructure that for life, though, because education is the one thing that uplifts a society, but it's also something for life. And an educated populace is the one thing that can protect us from tyranny, as Jefferson said. And so I look at the community college system, making that free, whether you're 18, whether you're 28, or whether you're 78. You go and you can take a class on rhetoric, welding, education, that when we look at all of these massive changes that AI is going to have in the workforce, well, being able to have free community college is the one thing that can retrain a population, help them get different jobs, help them improve, and really structurally change society, because we've lived in a world so long where it's go to the most elite college you can go to the best school like I did, right? Get as many degrees as possible. But then what you find out is you're working for corporations, you're manipulating the tax code, and you're helping the mergers and consolidations of various industries, as I saw firsthand.
So isn't community college, though, in Virginia already pretty much free?
It's cheaper than in-state schools and universities, but as part of this, there would be, so there's still a cost, to be clear, but as part of this, you'd be able to create a 2+2 pathway, so 2 years in community college, 2 years at a public college or university, that you could then graduate debt-free. And that's something that I think would open up the doors of opportunity for many people, right? I don't believe that education is something that should be restricted based off your parents' socioeconomic status. And when we look at it now, it's almost as if by design that we saddle people with educational debt, specifically the lawyer class, or caste as I call it, that if you're someone like myself or my fiance who did not grow up in an upper class family, you're going to have to take on loans to go to school.
Yep.
Then you're going to be saddled with those student loans for years, unless you go to Wall Street, and you're going to have to pay that off. But by the time you get 7 years into your big law job, they're going to say, you're great, we love you. We're going to make you partner. Right as you're getting ready to buy a home, you've paid off your student loans, maybe you have a kid, and then they say, but the only thing is you're going to have to put $1 million into the partnership, right? Because I will say about law firms is risk is based off the partnership buy-in. Like Goldman Sachs, the partners there used to have to risk their own capital. Then they go public, that gets removed, which then turns them into a massive financial institution. And when the people in charge don't have risk, well, then they're going to do whatever they want. So with the law firms, you buy in, and then you're set as a partner at this big law firm where your clients are corporations, you're manipulating the tax code, you're making it so that corporations are able to have more power than individuals, where their voice is considered protected speech, and that they further incentivize the financialization of America rather than empower the individual.
But corporations are people too, as you well know.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that the founding fathers could have ever envisioned this, that at the time of the founding of this country, corporations were limited in size, maximum 20 people. They were limited in duration, 15 or 30 years. They were also limited in geographic scope. And if we really want to go crazy with this, John, we can get all the way into the Delaware Court of Chancery, because why are 68% of Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Delaware? Well, the late 1890s, the DuPont family, they're headquartered in New Jersey. They see New Jersey's about to break them up with antitrust. So they say, oh, man, we're going to create the Delaware Court of Chancery. It's business friendly, but it's got no jury. That is un-American. That when I was a banker and I'm doing these big-time M&A deals, 98% of public-to-public company M&A deals, they're litigated, but where? In Delaware. Half my job was to prepare these partners for their depositions in Delaware, and it just always struck me. This little state that has 2 times as many corporate entities than it does people is the one dictating the majority of American law. It's not the Supreme Court. Corporate law is what reigns. That's Delaware.
When we return, Virginia Senate candidate Mark Moran reveals why he purposely bet on the betting market site Kalshi that he was going to run for office in order to get caught. You won't want to miss it. We are talking with an independent candidate. He's running for the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Senate seat currently occupied by a Democrat. His name is Mark Warner. He is a Democrat senator from Virginia, for Virginia. And Mark Moran is running to replace him as an independent. And I was just asking you, you've made a bit of news here with something called the Kalshi bet. A lot of people don't know what Kalshi is. I'm not sure I know what Kalshi is. It has something to do with prediction markets. So what is it? What did you do, and why have you become somewhat famous for this Kalshi bet?
Sure. So Kalshi and Polymarket are the two.
See, I'm not even pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, Kalshi.
Is it Kalshi or Kalshi?
Kalshi.
Kalshi, all right.
From my understanding, could be wrong.
Very good.
But is one of the two prediction markets that there are. Prediction markets are essentially a manipulation of the term gambling. If you look at Merriam-Webster, definition of gambling, putting money up for risk with the potential of reward, right? Mm-hmm. So Kalshi has been able to essentially throw a loophole in the CFTC. And the
CFTC is the Commodity Futures Trading.
Correct,
Commission, right?
Which is regulated by the Agriculture Committee.
Okay.
This was created for grain and stuff.
It is, yeah, it's an offshoot of ag futures, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so they have kind of weaponized a ruling in 2010 to be able to have these CFTC regulated prediction markets. But these prediction markets really are just another but more aggressive form of gambling where you could bet on anything from what Donald Trump says in a press conference to if you're going to run for office as a candidate yourself.
Mm-hmm. Or you can bet on who's going to win the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And you can also do that on your DraftKings account as well, too.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yes.
So what happened?
Sure. So in October of last year, I am very much a follower of these markets because I've been tweeting about this for 2 years, that historically it had been polls that inform media and media informs the voter. But now with the advent of prediction markets, it is going to be the prediction markets that inform media. And then that informs the voter. So you can sway an entire election by pushing a market in the way of your favorite candidate. I started to see that with Mamdani in the NYC mayoral race, that when I was going through on Polymarket, the trades that were going on, I could see that they were all at certain unique times. They would all combine from the same wallet. Now, the difference between Kalshi and Polymarket is on Polymarket, that's crypto. So it's on the chain, if you will, and you can trace the flow of funds. Mm-hmm. So I start doing that on Polymarket. And I see that this wallet that is moving the Mamdani market to show that he's more favorable is all funded by a wallet with $30 million in it. And even though it's different ultimate wallets placing the bet, they're all coming from the same place. So I start to raise the issue of foreign influence on these prediction markets. The New York Post ran an article, even Bill Ackman retweeted this, that this is a massive cause for concern, but no one paid attention. So then in knowing that I was going to run for office, I didn't know that much about Kalshi at the time. So I went up to New York. I met with them at their office, multiple hours, got to know a bunch of people. And I know the founder of Polymarket, Shane. I know the founder of Kalshi, Tarek. And these are guys who are close in age to me. These are companies that they're both valued in the median 20 billions, right? And they're in a race to go public. But they're moving fast, and there aren't the guardrails there. And I look at it as people are always going to bet. 49% of men 18 to 49 have a gambling account on their phone, right? That
What is that figured again?
49%.
49%? Mm-hmm. So almost half.
Almost half.
That's a very large number.
It's a very large number. And why is that? It's because men want purpose, they want risks, they want reward. But this is a simulation of that. It is essentially hijacking the dopamine receptors that men have. And it's something that's gone on for a long time. I mean, it starts in the classroom, then it goes and it goes. And it builds to this point where men want to hit it big. They want to make money. They want to risk things, which is why people think nothing of this. But I look at this whole culture of gambling as it's declining, it's devaluing our society. So Going back to these two companies, with Kalshi, I didn't know that much about them. So I go to meet with them. I start to see the designs that they have on the future of American politics. And so after I met with them, I asked, hey, can you throw me into a market? There was an existing market of who will run for office in 2026. You had people like Danica Patrick in there. And I asked their head of politics to throw me in. And he does. And this was after this New York Post article in October said that I was running for office. So I bet on myself. I was hoping to be caught immediately. I wasn't.
Because it's illegal to bet on yourself.
They have code. It's not illegal against federal or state law. It is against their code. And then they reached out to me only in February. And we had a nice little meeting with their compliance people, made everyone laugh. It was fun. They come to me back saying, okay, we're going to ban you for a year. Fine. We're going to fine you $800 for this $100 bet you took on yourself. Also reasonable. But we want to compel a statement from you publicly about your involvement in this. I said, well, a private company isn't going to compel my speech. And then they got rather upset. They come back and say, well, we're going to fine you $6,000 and we're going to ban you for 5 years. And I could tell at that point that this was by design, that why they asked me to do the public statement was marketing purposes, right? That when you look over the past year, you start to see more green signs in this town of DC that have call sheet statistics or that we are regulated by the CFTC, all of this because, again, they're in a battle against Polymarket. And these two companies are in a battle to go public. That's going to happen probably in the fall, unless I have anything to do with that. And if that happens, if we allow prediction markets in American politics, we're selling democracy because I can manipulate that all I want all day long to move any market that then media will report on and the voter will be informed upon. And I can't stand for that.
Still to come, Virginia Senate candidate Mark Moran takes us through his Commonwealth plan that is the backbone of his Senate campaign. Stay with us. Welcome back to After Hours. We are speaking with a political candidate running for the Senate in Virginia, the great Commonwealth of Virginia. His name is Mark Moran. Nice alliteration there. Did you think of that?
Yeah, my parents did a good job.
I mean, you have an MBA from UVA. You're a double who. I was just saying before the program, I know a lot of single who's. UVA, they're wahoos. They call themselves wahoo, and that's wahoo. Wahoo wah is the big thing, the
Correct.
big cheer there.
A fish that can drink twice its weight.
Twice its weight, yes. And they endeavor to prove that is true oftentimes at their fraternity parties. And so I know single who's, you are the first and only double who I have ever met. So this is
Pleasure and privilege.
a rarity. But you came out with something which is kind of interesting, talking about marketing, and you call it, so Virginia calls itself a Commonwealth, which is one word, Commonwealth, one word. So Mark Moran, taking, I guess, inspired by that, running for the Senate of Virginia, you come out with the Commonwealth plan, as in common and wealth, I guess, building wealth, like wealthy plan. And what is the plan? I gather it's kind of a big plan. I think it has 11 points. I'm not sure we have time for 11 points, but anyway, it's a good marketing. It sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds good, yeah. The Commonwealth plan. Yeah. Okay. Do people ask you about this wherever you go?
People do. Well. And, I started this campaign off speaking on ideas, and I didn't get that much attention. And then it only took a $100 bet on myself to get national and global attention.
This is Kalshi.
This is the Kalshi bet. But in terms of my ideas, I look at the United States government as a capital allocator, right? One that collects our taxes, that spends about $7 trillion per year, and we get nothing in return. But we have companies
now you get roads, you get national defense.
How good is our infrastructure?
You get a White House. You get a few things, but yeah. Okay.
Sure. But still, if you're a wealthy individual and you're going to invest in any company, John, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you $100,000 or $1 million, but I'm going to get some equity in that company in return, right?
The question is your return on that equity. Yes.
And and that depends on the performance of the company, right? But if we have companies like Booz Allen Hamilton that 97% of their revenue overall comes from the federal government, or Northrop Grumman, even larger company, but we're just giving government contracts away and we don't take any equity, that to me is very poor capital allocation. It's a way of looking at this, of putting an investor hat on, of that we as the United States and our government, we support these publicly traded companies, right, who have a fiduciary duty based on Delaware law to their shareholders, not to the citizens. So then why are we not taking some type of stake in them? And you saw Trump did that recently, 10% stake in some of these chip companies. But it's a broader idea that when we're giving government contracts to a company that, let's say, receives over $100 million a year in government contracts, we're in the negotiating seat. If we say we want 5% of your company, well, what are they going to do? They're going to give it to us because that's the entirety of their company.
Well, typically, though, when an investor invests in a company, they pay some form of money to make this investment. So it seems like the government would have to put some money in to get some money back, right?
And that's what we're doing with government contracts. That the whole way of this cost-plus system that we do now with the Pentagon.
So you would look at these government contracts as more of an equity-type investment rather than just government contracts.
Correct.
But then you have, it's very complicated very quickly, though. That seems to run against the grain of the free enterprise system, doesn't it? I mean, there's always been this separation between government being an investor versus government being maybe a customer or a consumer or a regulator, right?
Sure, but I look at this capitalism versus socialism debate of we're giving away money for nothing right now.
That's plus socialism. The government also gets tax revenue. So that's the other part of it, right?
Well, the tax revenue for a corporation, tax code is entirely manipulated. All that money going to the government is mostly from the middle class. It's absolute wealth extraction that's going on. That if I'm a wealthy guy and I have a private equity firm, my carried interest or my long-term capital gains, I'm not paying nearly as close to the welder or to the public school teacher as they do in taxes. And that's the problem to me. that we should move to a consumption-based tax system. One, that is the only way we create fairness, where it's not income tax, it's consumption based off what you buy. Because then wealthy people, you want your Bugatti, your Lamborghini, cool, that's great, free market. But you're gonna have to pay a tax on that, just as the person who wants a Toyota Corolla is gonna have to. But it makes it, especially when you talk about welfare distribution, that let's say that you're going to have to pay more in terms of consumption based off of what you buy. That is going to change people's behavior. It's going to change entirely the essentially function.
What happens to the income tax and the property tax then?
Consumption-based tax would make up for that, right? One that is based off of what we're
consuming. What about real estate taxes?
I don't believe in property tax, where you buy a property
so
and you're continuously taxed over and over.
You would get rid of all these taxes and just go to a consumption tax.
Consumption, and then make it so that corporations actually have to pay their fair share, which is like a political line. Everyone's like, John, corporations have to pay their fair share, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you actually treat corporations and remove various breaks that they have, and you say that, okay, all of these financial games that you did as a former banker that, I know innately, of making it so we're going to remove these games, right? Maybe we do top line revenue. Maybe we just do EBITDA tax, but one that actually makes companies not be able to play these games, especially in terms of moving money offshore, which is where a big problem is.
Mm-hmm. So which pillar of the Commonwealth plan is that then?
That's an overall.
This is the overall.
This is the overall thesis, right? So then let's keep on the publicly traded corporation type thing. As a former banker, I was working on a deal with a $7 billion publicly traded corporation buying a bankrupt nonprofit insurer out of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And it hit me that when I was increasing essentially the earnings per share of that company in this financial model, that then rewards the executives more because they're essentially managing every 3-month period to 3-month period, because that's how we do things as publicly traded corporations.
Those are the metrics which oftentimes determine executive compensation.
Exactly, right? Based off the restricted stock units, the RSUs. Mm-hmm. That's a screwed up system that we don't manage for the long term, which again goes back to my initial point here of the financialization of America, that we're not managing to our long-term benefit. That when there's a publicly traded Medicaid company that has a fiduciary duty to its shareholders, but not its patients, that is not okay. Now, why not remove all publicly traded corporations from Medicare and Medicaid? Because if you're a senator, you have the purse strings. You can allocate. That's something that structurally, because you'd have to have a transition timeline on that. You can't just say day 0, day 1, you're gone. That would bankrupt companies. But you can allow for the transition of this, which would also allow for more businesses to compete. Mm-hmm. The problem, and I saw this firsthand, is the consolidation of businesses. That then they become massive, their incentive is to go public. But we need more smaller and medium-sized businesses that are not public, that create local jobs, that are incentivized rather than doing stock buybacks, but to invest in communities. Because when I go to Southwest Virginia or Southside Virginia and they say, why'd this hospital close? Or this hospital is about to close, I say, you know what? It's by design. And that hospital is never coming back because a private equity firm bought that, and then 3 years from now, when it gets really dire, they're going to separate the real estate assets, and then ultimately they're going to sell that off. That hospital's never coming back, and that is what's happening across America.
And this is the kind of the predicate of your Commonwealth plan,
correct?
So-called Commonwealth plan. Commonwealth plan.
We have all this money.
Right.
We are the wealthiest country. We have all this money, all of these resources, but we've never actually capitalized on it. Mm-hmm. That there is a world that if we were to take appropriate equity stakes in companies, we could start every child born with a $25,000 account. One that, based off 8% compound interest, would grow to $100,000 by the time they're 18. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe use that for community college. It'd be free in this case, or college. Who knows? Maybe you don't. If you kept that in, that'd be $3.5 million by the time you're 65. Mm-hmm. That is a solution to Social Security, because that's going to run dry in 2032, 2033, and I don't see anyone else talking about this.
So when you travel around, where do you encounter the voters that you feel like you can have the most impact with? I mean, is it? I mean, the population center, of course, is Northern Virginia. Mm-hmm. So is that where you're spending most of your time?
Everywhere outside of Northern Virginia.
Everywhere outside Northern Virginia?
Everywhere
Because you're
outside.
from Fairfax, basically.
I grew up in McLean, in the belly of the beast. I always drove around McLean, Great Falls, wondered why there are so many Ukrainian flags in front of $3, $4, $5 million mansions. And then I realized it's just the profiteering off of government money. That I see more Ukraine flags in Great Falls than I do American. And that leads me to think that this system is broken, that there's no industry in this town, yet why are there all these mansions in Great Falls and McLean? And that's something I'm here to talk about. So when I go everywhere outside of Northern Virginia, they're receptive to hear that, because these two current senators, Kaine and Warner, that, well, they're not from Virginia, they didn't grow up here, but also they're representing their own elite interests and the interests of the political class in Northern Virginia, not the real people of the Commonwealth.
Well, I think Mr. Kaine is from Richmond, though, isn't he?
No, he was mayor there. I believe he's from Missouri originally.
So is this something, you mentioned money before, fundraising. How much does it take to run a statewide political campaign in Virginia, for instance?
Well, in politics, money has always gotten attention. However, I can get attention for free. So I don't have nearly as much money as Warner, as $13.8 million cash on hand to do this. But what I do have is the ability to capture attention. And I also speak to this lost generation of young men, which is why I went after the prediction market companies, because by design, we go after these young men, and we start in the classroom. We medicate them if you're a rambunctious, high-energy boy like I was, and then that goes into the basement where you get hooked on the dopamine addiction of video games. Then it turns into pornography, where 78% of Gen Z men watch pornography. 74% say they have a problem with it. And then that turns into the screen, and then that turns into the app. And this is a destruction of young men. And so my message is one that it doesn't need money, because it's true. And it's one that if no one else goes out there, John, and says anything about the destruction of young men that has happened on purpose since the early 2000s, then I don't know who will. So this is something that I'm out here fighting day in, day out to get my message out. So I appreciate the opportunity. But it's one that I'm not willing to back down from just because I don't have as much money as the wealthiest senator.
Mark Moran, running for the U.S. Senate as an independent in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mark Moran, congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.